Well, good news, Charles.
What's that, Jason?
We're closing in today. We're indoors. Way less likely that Antifa will hassle us here.
Inside your apartment, unless there's some... And it's pronounced, Jason, you pronounced it once again. I don't mean to correct you, but it's not Antifa. It's Antifa.
Antifa, exactly. But the other bit of good news, Charles, is that after over a year, it seems like finally this image of the Rosenstein is ready. You could stick a fork. Oh, well, unfortunately, my screen share for the graphic is not ready. But this was an image that regular viewers of the show are going to remember has been floating around since September of 2018. And if people were watching the Senate hearings earlier today, Rod Rosenstein is absolutely done.
Yeah, I mean, he came across, I mean, you think about this guy. This is a guy who was the U.S. attorney for Baltimore area, I think for all of Maryland, for many years. So he was the top U.S. attorney prosecuting cases, deciding which cases to prosecute, and then prosecuting cases in a port, Baltimore, that is one, supposedly with New Orleans and New York and a few other ports, is one of the leading transshipment points for contraband in and outside this country. Huh. And this guy came across, is arguably worse of a poker face than James Clapper. I mean, he was... I could only watch so much of it. I mean, because when you're under oath and you're answering questions and you're trying to be convincing, you don't really want to be doing this and shifting around and, I can't, that just doesn't inspire confidence.
He was nervous.
And he's a consummate bureaucrat. He's been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. But I am sick and tired of these people when you finally bring him into a questioning session. It's always, there are 110,000 people in the Justice Department. I can't know everything, and I do a lot of cases, and I have a loyal staff, and I have to trust my staff. No, you fucking moron. That's not true at all. If you project to the wider world, which he now has done, that it is possible for the person who makes the crucial decisions inside our Justice Department to basically not know what the fuck is going on. That's just opening up a Pandora's box, which is already well known and wide open for the people who want to get something out of the Justice Department to figure out how to corrupt the people around Rod Rosenstein and others, right? If you know Rod Rosenstein eventually is going to want to be in the private sector and pay some bills and have some money for retirement. Write books and speeches and whatever. There are a lot of rising Rod Rosensteins, God forbid, inside the Justice Department. And, what I don't get at all in the question that I saw in the beginning was, we learned that he shows up February 1st, 2017. February 1st, 2017. We also learned that January 4th, 2017, the line people in the FBI who have been all over Flynn said, there's nothing here. There's no reason, no derogatory information, and it's not like you were picking on the person who was going to be the social secretary in the White House.
Right.
The President of the United States had won an election despite all the rigging, despite all the bullshit from Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and our allies in the UK and other countries, as well as despite all that, he won. And he won despite the resistance, despite the various attempts not to seat electors, to mount challenges and recounts and all that stuff. He had an absolute right to select this person. And he selected this person, and it wasn't like the person had zip experience. He's a decorated 3-star general. He had been selected by Obama to be head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So you can't say that the guy was that he was partisan or whatever. Obama picked him, right? And then they had in the case of Flynn, honest policy disagreements over, some boneheads or collection of boneheads in the Obama administration said, Fast and Furious works so well, we'll send illegal guns into Mexico and check and see what happens to those guns when they come back to prove it. The people who came up with that idiotic idea, which cost Randall Terry and others their lives and for which we've never had a full accounting, those same people said, you know what, we've got a problem in the Middle East. Why don't we turn everything on its head and turn history on its head, and let's get in bed with the Iranians and piss off the Saudis and the Sunni Muslims, and while we're at it, for the hell of it, why don't we create ISIS? And since we probably shouldn't use our own money, why don't we get Qatar and other states to basically pay for the weapons that will transship into ISIS so that these people in ISIS can cut Westerners' heads off and destabilize country. That same team, was coming up with these cockamamie, dangerous schemes, taking credit for it, basking in the glory of Barack Obama's Nobel Peace Prize, which is really, that thing should be
revoked
or whatever you do. And come 2014, Flynn had enough. And he's, you can't, this is horrible what you're doing. And so Obama made an example of him. It was a personal vendetta, precisely what you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to, as President of the United States or any senior officer of the United States government, you are not supposed to train the awesome power that the FBI has on paper when it decides to actually investigate things, and the awesome power that the Department of Justice has on your political enemies, real, perceived, or imagined. You're not supposed to do that. It's a very serious set of crimes. And so here Flynn did it, called Obama out. Trump noticed that Flynn knew enough about Flynn to say this is a decent guy. And trying to manage the transition, I don't know how well you remember that period precisely, Jason, but I remember it because I started appearing on Russian outlets, on many outlets. I'm not bragging, but in 2016, because of the Clinton Foundation stuff and its importance.
Colluding with Russian outlets?
I certainly was not colluding with anybody. But the point is, I remember vividly that period because the outgoing president had decided, kind of in a last-ditch fit of pique, to shut down a bunch of Russian consulates, to declare a bunch of Russian people persona non grata, and making it more turbulent for Donald Trump when he would come Inauguration Day. And I remember, just as a private citizen, being concerned about that. And what is it about this Obama administration that sees a Russian under everybody's bed? But, at the very beginning of the Russian exercise, the Obama presidency was like, hey, why don't we do this project in Skolkovo? Why don't we press the the overcharge button? Why don't we get right back in bed with Russia in 2009 and 10? And by the end of it, it's like, I don't know which was the scorned lover. It's just, Obama is determined to blame every problem in the world on the Russians.
Well, but what about when he said to Mitt Romney during the debate that call 1980, they want their foreign policy back?
Right, I know. To me, what was laid bare, and this is my first reaction within 24 hours to the hearing. I'm sure we'll see more information and have more time to contemplate it. My first reaction to this is, it's a study in contrasts. You think back, we have personal knowledge of the terror that Jerry Corsi felt, when he was literally terrorized, not with physical abuse, but emotional abuse, in a hot set of rooms without his lawyer, being told again and again, asked again and again the same set of questions, trying to maneuver him into a perjury trap. Jerry didn't have the benefit of being able to say, well, I have a lot of people working in the Corsi household, and I'm 73, and
it's actually true.
Right, and there are actually a lot of people, but you don't get that benefit when you're on the other end of the table. But here we see this guy who rolls into the Department of Justice. He before long, he is the acting Attorney General when it comes to matters pertaining to Russia. And this guy doesn't even bother to check the file as to, were the allegations on Flynn remotely serious? Was the predicate solid? Was there a basis to train this awesome power that he held control over as the acting Attorney General? Was it reasonable to do that? He should have been asking those questions before he took office. It shouldn't have been, oh yeah, this is a great phone call I got from Sessions or somebody. I'm not going to do any due diligence. What am I wandering into here? He should have been asking those questions. Where is the record of that? And February 1st, 2017, Peter Smith was still alive. He was still active. He was still trying to get to the bottom of what happened to the missing emails that various and sundry people claimed they might have had. That's something that I would be doing if I were the incoming Deputy Attorney General. I'd want to say, no, wait a minute. I'm the person who really makes sure that this large place runs on time. We have many people we could prosecute. We just went through a contentious election. People are concerned about the integrity of the election process and the judicial process. there are a lot of very suspicious things that happened in 2016, rather than allow the outgoing administration and James Comey and other Obama and Clinton connected people to basically sabotage the incoming presidency. I want a fresh set of eyes to look at all this. And Rosenstein's answers today confirm a pattern that I've seen amongst the high elected officials at cabinet level in the previous administration and maybe in the Trump administration. They on purpose are put into chairs with so much stuff going on around them that they can't possibly have the defense. How was I supposed to know that? Right? I'm a busy person, and the Secretary of State is under Hillary Clinton. She's running around sending emails to the people in the president's office saying, am I supposed to come to this cabinet meeting today? No, of course not. Why would we want the Secretary of State to come to a cabinet meeting? Most of the time you're stinking drunk. We don't want you anywhere near. It's a morning meeting. We're not going to do the cabinet meeting so you have time to clean up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, it's just the incompetence.
Yeah.
You could take, the incompetence is one thing that leaps out at me. The second thing that leaps out at me is how unfair it is to hector people like Corsi for those. I don't know who was responsible for sending those 2 FBI agents to me. In December of 2018, and after the election, why people were jumping all over me on just one occasion, and why the mainstream press would not stop talking about what was my potential role in a memorandum that I had nothing to do with. Just my name is mentioned in it, but supposedly I'm the architect of raising money, and trying to get to Julian Assange. All over that, in every meeting I had with them, it was, you need to understand what motivates the resistance. People are not behaving like this because they're just straight up stuck on stupid. They're doing it on this because they're worried that something is going to come out. Why would Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Valerie Jarrett, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, and Rosenstein and Mueller, why would all these people be worried? What is causing them to go so far off kilter into, criminal obstruction of justice, criminal sedition, criminal, whatever you want to call it? Why would they do all this kind of stuff?
Because all that crap is only 5 years in prison, and treason could be the death penalty.
Right. Well, some of these other crimes are 20 years.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're involved in such serious crimes going back so long. I mean, it's like I was saying, there's a street in the town where I grew up in that has just always been right on red. So every single person in the town kind of pulls up there and just makes a right. And then they added a red light camera. And then, my parents and people in the neighborhood told me, I'm getting tons of tickets at that thing. Not because they're scofflaws, but because when you spend so many years doing something in a certain way, even if it's technically not right, you're like, what? I got a ticket for that?
Right. Exactly. Well, okay, so that brings us to an opportunity to connect some dots. And this is going to be an interchange here where I hope viewers in the crowd will check me on what I'm saying and read for yourself. And I'm going to ask you, Jason, do you believe in coincidences?
They do sometimes occur, but no, I generally do not believe in coincidences.
So what I'm going to tell you now is these are true facts, as opposed to what Rosenstein and Comey and Obama and Clinton's like to deal with. We could go way further back into history if you wanted to, but let's just start on March 8th, 1992. And on March 8th, 1992, I believe, is when Jeff Gerth's article on Whitewater first appeared in the New York Times. You could try to Google and see if you see Whitewater Gerth 1992.
Now, this interestingly would have also been right around the time that the huge controversy over police brutality in beating up Rodney King was going on.
Right. So this is an article. I don't know what just happened there, but
I'm getting it from the original New York Times.
There you go.
Still thinking.
Say tick tock, tick tock. But
strange.
Anyway, so March 8th, 1992. It's not necessarily important to see the actual more than what we have here.
Actually, something else is going on because it's not showing up over here. Hang on, let's try something.
Well, but the importance of this thing is it's on the front page of the New York Times, and all major newspapers ration space on the front page. It's almost the last thing they do, I'm told, before it goes to actual press, is really fight back and forth. Do you really need that many words? What about this? And this is nice placement on the front page of the New York Times. I think it's right before Super Tuesday in 1992. Now, in 1992, Bill Clinton came off the bench quickly, but he stumbled immediately with the Jennifer Flowers revelations that were, I think, in January of 1992. And so he was going into this important set of primaries, many contests, a couple days hence, and up pops this story by Jeff Gerth. Now, the person who was doing damage control and the war room leader, it wasn't James Carville, it was Hillary Clinton. So a damage control team was put in place here to figure out what were the exposure areas. We know this from multiple books about Hillary Clinton, including, she doesn't describe it as a damage control thing. Jeff Gerth's book, Her Way, is very helpful talking through this period. And there are other books that discuss exactly what was going on. So you can triangulate. You take the bias of Hillary Clinton and the bias of the anti-Clinton people out of the books, and sometimes the facts all just come together for you. So March 8th, this is a major league nuclear weapon. It could have sunk the Clinton campaign early. So they put together, according to reporting by Gerth and others, they put together a task force right around March 8th, 1992, to list out all the scandals that are connected to the Clintons and to figure out, how serious they were and to get ready to push back hard against people like Jeff Gerth, right? So the real scandal, we could do several weeks on the details of it, but the tease on the real scandal is that it wasn't simply about Whitewater alone, this crazy land development project in remote Arkansas. No, what it was about was the long-standing pattern and practice in Arkansas, and there's a similar pattern and practice in New York State, so I'm not picking on Arkansas for being Arkansas, a long-standing pattern and practice of people, whether rich or not, going into politics in Arkansas and having rules bent for them to get them, banks and other patrons, to give them money, either lend them money on concessionary terms, to go into projects that in theory couldn't lose because the partners were people who wanted to get something out of business. That is, when I go through the history, that is Arkansas. Probably as I think about it, when you go back to the very development of this country in the beginning, the Virginia Company, the Massachusetts Company, the various companies that were set up in England by merchants to bring settlers over here were all land development schemes. They were get-rich schemes. You can see some of the prospectuses that still exist, actually, in old-style English. They lie like crazy, and there's gold on the ground, there's food lying everywhere, the living's easy, give us your money and you're gonna do fine. So the notion that land development schemes would be used to feather the nests of politicians in Arkansas is not, it's neither controversial nor unlikely. It's a certainty. That's exactly what they were doing. It involved the entire political spectrum. And Gerth put he focused on this one Whitewater venture. He did fantastic work, but he should have widened the frame of his inquiry, because Whitewater was 230 acres. The real story was that firms like International Paper and other timber companies had these vast tracts of land in Arkansas. It's customary. Very few individuals will want to own even 100 acres if you're not a farmer or very wealthy, let alone thousands and thousands of acres. I have developed several small parcels myself. I know a little bit how it works. And key in any of these parcels is there any access to the parcel? Can you get to, if it's one thing to tell a retiree, hey, you're in Chicago, why don't you retire in the Ozarks? But right. If to get there, you have to walk up a mountain, through a forest, as in one of these, grim fairy tales or Shrek 2 or whatever it is. That's one thing. On the other hand, if you've got a 2 or 4 lane interstate that, goes zipping by, and then you get off the interstate and you've got a nice, reasonable road to get you to your property, and you've got Do you have electricity at the property? Back then, do you have telephones to the property? Do you have septic systems? Do you have access to food, stores, recreation, all that kind of stuff? Whitewater was buried in the middle of nowhere. There were no roads, no electricity. And you also, when you get involved in this, you care a lot about your neighbors. You don't want to sit there in Chicago and pay whatever the amount of money is for this plot of land in Whitewater and finally arrive after your wife is saying to you, we really don't, why are we leaving Chicago? All our friends are in Chicago. Honey, I've always wanted to live on a river in Arkansas. Well, why have we never been to Arkansas before?
In a swamp.
Right. Well, how do you know what it's like? Trust me, dear. Anyway, so you get there and you discover that your neighbors are either non-existent or dung heap or a disused mobile home or whatever. And so this was, in the beginning, a deeply suspicious exercise that for some strange reason went on. The Clintons originally bought into this in, I want to get the facts straight in my head, in August 2nd, 1978 is when I believe they arranged with Jim McDougall arranged for them to buy this 230-acre parcel. Now, there's several problems with it, and I'm not going to go into excruciating detail, but I'm just going to talk it through without regards to tables and numbers and whatever. In any land development deal, indeed in any investment deal, one of the more important decisions you can make.
Is this it? This can't be it. This is something about Wisconsin. Yeah, sorry, wrong. It's Whitewater.
Yeah, it's the most important element in any investment transaction. Very frequently is the purchase price.
Oh, yeah.
So you can get involved overpaying for something because you believe it has scarcity value and you want to hold it for a long period of time, and maybe you'll do okay, and by the time you sell it, nobody cares what you paid for it. I mean, that's one approach. But most people really focus in on, am I getting a good deal? Now, Bill and Hillary were supposedly very smart people. We hear that Hillary's one of the smartest lawyers ever in the world, according to her fan club. And Bill does come across as certainly glib. He's not, when it comes to personal decisions, terribly intelligent. But these idiots signed up to buy the 230 acres of land, 100% with debt, at a purchase price that equated to approximately $880 an acre. Now, Jim McDougall, the promoter who arranged the financing, had some modest success with these land development deals. Not a decade of success, and certainly not decades of success. But what had happened, known or unbeknownst to the Clintons, was that the master parcel that Whitewater was a piece of, the master parcel I think was 3,200 acres or thereabouts, and that parcel was purchased by an inside group from International Paper for a pittance. No one's really sure yet how much it was, but it was purchased in around the June-July 1978 timeframe for maybe $100 an acre by insiders. And the insiders then turned around. That's Webb Hubbell. Yeah.
I know. That's why I put that up. But
Father's Day, right? Coming up.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. But wasn't he involved in Whitewater?
Absolutely, yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, Charles, and I don't know, maybe this is, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but is International Paper involved in like maybe exploiting towns that don't have a lot of money or sophistication? Like putting their plants in places where they
absolutely. No, yeah.
pollute the crap out of the place. Because we did a movie in, not Asheville, but Asheville was like the closest town we could go to where there were restaurants. And there was an International Paper factory there.
Right.
It smelled so bad.
Yeah,
there's no way that can't be bad for you.
Yeah, I know a little bit about this. So yeah, with a pulp plant uses, I don't know if they still do, but they use chlorine.
Yeah.
And they use
chemicals.
They use chemicals, and there's a large amount of wastewater. Yeah. And so the Clinton fan club would have you believe that Bill Clinton was a genius and a visionary, and and Hillary too, for bringing these people, bringing business into Arkansas. I think real historians, when real history is told about this, are going to look at this and say, no. They wanted to find a schlub, a sucker, who was, financially in hock to his or her backers, who would be spending as much time as possible doing anything other than really checking to make sure that the laws were enforced, so that environmentally harmful companies and operations
Can do that kind of stuff.
Can do that stuff in Arkansas. So the chicken farms, I don't know if you've ever been to a chicken or poultry processing plant or a chicken farm. I mean, if you want to lose a lot of weight quickly the hard way, you just walk in and walk around one of the, you'll throw up 10 pounds of barf. I mean, they stink. And the amount of, chicken shit does not.
You're talking about Congress now, Charles.
Yeah, exactly. So staying back though, if I can, into the frame, what happened is that a bunch of insiders in Arkansas, individuals, figured a way to get this large parcel of land, call it a 3,000 acre parcel of land. And I'm just making up these numbers for illustrative purposes. My suspicion is the insiders bought the property for $100 an acre. And then they arranged to create a company, which was called 101 River Development Company, okay, to sell the land to 101 River Development for a markup, find investors. And like days later,
so they all get money from this shell corporation that's got a loan from some weird SNL.
Well, I think the way it would start is the individual, you and I would get together and we'd say, all right, what we're going to do here. I've got to deal with international paper, Jason. I like you, we'll just do this 50-50. I can get this land for $100 an acre. And then we're going to flip it to people who will pay us $400 an acre two weeks later.
Sounds good.
And then for the really dumbass people, what we're going to do is we need to have the ability to say that Route 101, which is the route next to Whitewater, will be extended and roads will be built. And here we have this attorney general who wants to be governor. Let's have him have an interest, an economic interest in these parcels. We'll lend him the money to buy the land so that we know we can put pressure on him to get this road built that will make the value of the thing that much more valuable. By focusing just on Whitewater and not on the wider frame, I believe that Girth and others missed not only the land development scandal, but the fact that the people who were promoting these projects also had tiny little banks that would go to their friends and say, all right, without telling you, Jason, that I own 2,000 acres, how'd you like to buy? You've always wanted a nice little place next to, Dog Patch and Dolly Parton and next to some rib shack. It's just what you love.
I like ribs.
You can have, we could fly down on my little plane to the raccoon dinner barbecue every year.
Roadkill barbecue.
I've got a banker over here. All you have to do is give me 10% down and I'll get you into a contract. There's no credit check. You're just going to have to make payments of $200 a month for 15 years. And you can have this parcel of land here and you can hang around with Bill Clinton and Jim Guy Tucker and Senator Fulbright and all these people. And if you want to get business done in Arkansas, there's no better way to get associated with this group. Besides, it's only going to cost you $4,000, for your lot. Right. And if you're inclined to be crooked, you look at that and you say, well, that's not so bad. And all these local bank presidents are saying, great, what we'll do is we'll have Jason, we'll find a way to finance it into this purchase. We'll find a way to take him out of the purchase. And we own all this unsold land. So every time there are transactions at ever higher prices for small pieces of the land, our holdings can fairly be marked up on the basis of these comparables. So it's a very involved, crooked scheme. One further nuance, which is really interesting that we've talked about while roaming around the city, but I haven't explained properly, is that installment purchase contract that I discussed with you is not allowed in many different states. I'm not sure about New York State, but in many states you are not allowed to do this because it's just like a payday loan. What really happens in these installment transactions is, until you pay the full amount of the purchase price over, let's say it's a 15-year term, you are responsible for the property taxes and maintenance costs of a parcel that you don't acquire title to until the very end of the transaction.
It's a good way for the owner to offload the cost of having it on some sucker who could die or run out of money or whatever.
It's even better than that. So the real business plan of these operatives is you do not record the sale, in the county deed office until you've paid off the entire purchase contract, right? So even better than what you're talking about is not try it with you, but think of some dumb sucker you may know. You entice somebody to come up with 10% down. Okay, that 10% down, you probably have to give a fair amount of it to the real estate broker. And you do it knowing full well the person is likely going to default, hoping that they're going to default. And then you're supposed to declare all the payments as income that the person made when they default. So they get nothing back, right? But if you're a crook, which the Clintons are, I think, inveterate crooks, and the people around them are crooked, this is a perfect way, like the Clinton Foundation, to have these transactions that nobody can figure out, nobody knows where the money's flowing, and you're creating a stream of cash that when you don't report it to the state tax authorities and you don't report it to the IRS, now you've got black money that you can use to fund your political campaign, that you can use to fund your lifestyle. Instead of selling the Whitewater lots once, we don't really yet know how many installment purchase contracts happen.
Right.
And then we marry that back up with the strange fact that in 1978, in August 2nd, 1978, after the primary, when it was established that Bill would be the Democratic candidate for governor and therefore the ultimate victor at a time when the Democrats were going to win, it's established that Bill's going to be the governor. It's established that he will have the power to appoint all these different officials who can grease these projects and make these rickety banks stay out of trouble for a few more years. They do this personally. Now, I don't know if you've ever taken out a personal loan to, let's say, 2 loans to buy a piece of property. But when you do something like that, normally the banks are very, very cautious. They'll say, okay, Jason, yeah, we'll give you a primary mortgage, which is, I think, what the Clintons had, a primary loan. I think it may or may not have been actually technically secured, the way you would think a mortgage might be secured. That big loan, for 90% of the purchase price roughly, had conditions in it, which included one from the paperwork that I've seen so far, that you had to put up a cash down payment, right? That you equity capital. But instead, McDougal arranged for the Clintons the opportunity to borrow from another bank for their cash down payment, which meant that they had nothing at risk, right? So here McDougal, in my view, was screwing the Clintons, actually. He had side deals he didn't cut them in on.
Maybe that's why he died in jail.
Exactly. And
who's this guy?
I have no clue.
He's looking remarkably close to Hillary, isn't he?
Indeed. But maybe, is that McDougal?
I don't think it's McDougal,
Yeah.
is it? He's got some military stuff on.
Right.
I don't know who that is. The Denver Post? Oh,
God almighty.
we can't look at it until we...
Anyway, if I could just go back into this history a little bit. So the real story on Whitewater is something that 2 people were tasked in particular, other than Hillary, to get to the bottom of in 1992. All right? And who were those 2 people, Jason?
I think you said it was Vince Foster and Susan Rice.
Vince Foster and Loretta Lynch.
Loretta Lynch, sorry.
Right, so by March of 1992, and in Vince's case earlier than that, folks had been bearing in on Whitewater. And now Vince is described in various books as somebody, both David Brock's book and other books, as somebody who really was a stickler on details. What is this?
This is PolitiFact saying something about Bill Clinton
Judging
basically...
it and probably saying that it is false.
Yeah, PolitiFact is going to say it's false. But this is... Pete Olson said Bill Clinton basically told Loretta Lynch we killed Vince Foster. Texas congressman said President Bill Clinton intimated that the governor's lead lawyer intimidated the government's lead lawyer into not seeking an indictment of Hillary Clinton by telling her we killed Vince Foster. I have a feeling she would have known about it way before that.
Right, this is my point, that by March of 1992, right, that's before Bill won the election, Loretta Lynch was deeply into the fine details, trying to rebut accusations leveled at the campaign. She was centrally involved trying to get into the records of this Whitewater Development Corporation. Now, Whitewater Development Corporation, we talked a lot about these nonprofit corporations. Whitewater Development Corporation did not actually get incorporated until 1979, and I want to say in the June-July timeframe. So why is that important? When you buy a property and you take out 2 loans to finance it, if you want to contribute that property into a corporation, you have to be very careful. You have to really study At the time that you contribute the property, what do the bank loans say about whether you can do that or not do that? What has happened to the value of the land between August of 1978 and the new arrangement, I think, came together. A new mortgage arrangement came together September 30th or thereabouts, 1979. Interest rates had been rising, political instability had been rising, asset prices had been falling. Bill had been screwing up as governor and alienating a lot of people. The papering of this transaction of transferring the land into a corporation, the nature of whatever legal guarantees had been given, this was, I think, jointly and severally guaranteed by the Clintons and the McDougalls. That means that if the McDougalls failed to pay, the Clintons had to pay 100%.
But it's jointly guaranteed. However, he didn't inhale.
So now we're in 1979, and to date, a lot of the analysis of what may have happened with Whitewater, whether it's Bill Clinton talking about it, Hillary Clinton talking about it, or people who dislike the Clintons talking about it, they all say that the paperwork was a disaster.
Not Now tells us that Judy Mickowicz's stepbrother was the guy who found Vince Foster's body.
Really?
Was it you who asked me earlier today, do you believe in coincidences? That's certainly a bizarre one.
That is, it is. So we're back in 1992. Loretta Lynch has the project of defending the Clintons against accusations that they were engaged in financial improprieties, pay-to-play, transactions that may have bankrupted a bank in Arkansas that did indeed go belly up and did indeed cost taxpayers a lot of money. That was a serious thing to be studying, and Loretta Lynch was on point, according to multiple reports back in 1992. She was all over that. She either is a complete bonehead and studied nothing, or she knows and is intimately involved and should be questioned extensively about her activities back in 1992. How much did she know? How aggressively did she look into this? How come she didn't care about where all the records were for the Whitewater Development Company? Who had custody and control of those records? So this was if you're back in March of 1992, you haven't yet won the Democratic nomination. You certainly haven't won the general election. People thought at the time that 1992 was George H.W. Bush's to lose. And he was, I think, favored in the beginning to win, but of course he was a far worse candidate than Joe Biden. And so he just basically fell flat on his face.
Eric is asking about this box that Hillary had taken out of Vince Foster's office.
Right.
He's wondering what was in it. Hasn't it been announced that it was Whitewater documents that was in it?
Well, we're in 1993 talking about this. I just want to get us to 1992. Sure. I will answer that question, and if I don't, please remind me. So Jeff Gerth does a lot of work, and this is we're getting back to coincidences. First, we have here Loretta Lynch, who, of course, in June of 2016 on the tarmac in Phoenix, met Bill Clinton by chance and was talking about grandchildren in a private hangar where it's hotter than Hades in Phoenix at that time of year. And she would, of course, just thought nothing of the fact that Bill Clinton stormed into her plane, and insisted, I got to talk to you about your grandchildren.
Well,
nothing
it's also
else.
Not expensive to park your plane and do unscheduled things with it. So everybody who's running a jet just leaves it there to have an impromptu conversation.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. So back in 1992, after March, Gerth writes story after story and infuriates the Clintons, who obviously are very concerned that Jeff will get to the bottom of what was really going on. Indeed, they in the accounts that are now written by Bill or Hillary or their sycophantic followers, they gloat about the fact, without revealing what the true problem was, they gloat about the fact that Jeff's reporting was too complex and it turned off the public, and they were really happy that Jeff hadn't found it. It's what they say in their books. But now, of course, they lie to everybody.
Right.
Now, what was interesting, though, they always do this when they've got somebody they're worried about. They say, so then a right-wing zealot,
right,
who sold anti-Clinton T-shirts. They describe her as this way. She's an examiner with the Resolution Trust Corporation. She's reading Jeff Gerth's work, and she's like, holy shit, this sounds like a really serious problem. And SNL went down, tens of millions of dollars disappeared. It seems that a lot of people in Arkansas are involved in this, Republicans and Democrats alike. I'm going to make a criminal referral to the Little Rock U.S. attorney, who it turned out was a Republican appointee. And this guy sits on it, decides, he's his name is Charles or Chuck Banks, though he was nominally a Republican, H.W. had nominated him to be a federal judge, and he had to be confirmed, and he was concerned about getting confirmed. He wanted to be a federal judge. So he slows the thing down in Little Rock, and this determined, and I think principled lady, who the Clintons and their hangers-on have excoriated, says, no, I'm going to push this to Maine justice. I'm not going to leave it in Little Rock. There's too much corruption in Little Rock. I'm going to send it to Maine justice around, I think, later in the summer, maybe August, September 1992. Who was the person back then in 1992 at Maine justice who said, we're not going to prosecute this. We're not going to, it's too politically sensitive right before this election. Who stopped that from going forward?
Let me guess. Was it the same guy who was hanging out in Congress today?
No.
Oh, it wasn't him?
Nope.
Who was it?
It's the man who likes scotch.
Oh,
and
Mueller.
Robert Mueller.
Oh.
In the fall, late summer, fall of 1992, Mueller stops this investigation from going forward before the election in 1992. And so here we have Loretta Lynch, we have Mueller. Then they get elected, and there's the nothing burger, and that's the money getting ready to be transferred into the Whitewater Bank. But we have the election.
This is just to pay for us lunch.
No, it's scotch. Yeah. Yeah. But so we...
nothing burgers aren't cheap, Charles.
Right. And you go through the timeline of this election in 1992. Bill has written a very lengthy book that, if you need something to keep a door open, is much less than a paperweight or a door, whatever you think, to keep a door opener open. You just buy this hardback, put it on the floor, and the door will stay open. Yeah, and that's the Kindle edition, but the hardback is, I think it runs to about, here you can get a collectible hardback of this book for $4.
Really?
It gives you a sense of, you can't buy certain.
Oh wow!
You could barely get a latte at Starbucks when it's open for $4. But in New York,
that's cheaper than a Duraflame log. You could just buy this book and dip it in lighter fluid.
Exactly. So, but anyway, in this book and in other books, Taylor Branch's book, we learn a lot about what was happening between the election day and between the dread day the Clintons arrived inside the White House, the 20th of January, 1993. We also learn a lot about that internal period from Hillary's perspective, from Bill's perspective, in many different books. And it's crystal clear from all that Bill Clinton was certainly the incoming president of the United States, but Hillary Clinton was the first is Bill first? You have Al Gore running around pretending he's vice president, but Hillary Clinton was directing the early tragic missteps in the White House. Virtually everything they touched in the beginning turned to shit. Everything.
Isn't there somebody prominent who said that? I think John Podesta said that about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. So it's very, in consulting terms, there are these people like to have these 4 boxes, you 4 boxes.
You said consulting or insulting?
I was thinking you weren't going to use a different vowel there, were you, for a second? But anyway, no. So you have high intelligence, low intelligence, high arrogance, low arrogance. You love people who have high intelligence and low arrogance, and you run away from people who have low intelligence and high arrogance. That's Hillary Clinton. I'm sorry. We can judge her work, 50 years of lying. This is a person who has botched every project in her life. That involves anything to do with business. I won't comment on Chelsea. That's another subject. But anything.
The commodities trading went pretty well for her.
Right, and no controversy on that for the rest of her life. But anyway, in this early period, they try to install. It's crucially important to get a female attorney general. Zoe Baird doesn't make it across the line. Kimber Wood doesn't make it across the line. They find this crazy Janet Reno. And she gets installed as Attorney General in early March of 1993. But there's as we saw with Donald Trump in that early period, Bill Clinton had lived in Washington, D.C. when he went to Georgetown, but it's a big deal to pick up everything, your family, and move it to Washington, D.C., even when you're the president. And so many things went wrong in this time frame. The healthcare task force was a disaster that was led by Hillary and who else? Ira Magaziner.
Oh.
Who features in this Clinton Foundation stuff. So,
are we sure this isn't Robert Mueller with a wig?
Oh boy. So they screw up the travel office. They accused.
But it's not really a screw up. It was an attack, wasn't it? They were trying to run a criminal operation with the travel bill.
Right. And so I don't want to, I see the time, I don't want to go into a lot of minutia on it, but suffice it to say, somebody who might be writing a book about this has found a lot of things that were going wrong, very badly wrong, and especially one thing for Vince Foster. So Vince was the one who was supposed to be stern and play by the rules, and he really took the law seriously, and by most accounts that seems to be the type of person he was. He gets the responsibility around March of 1992 to defend the Clintons against all these problems, and so he gets the records of Whitewater and Madison, he's studying them, and time comes, by April 15th, 1993, the Clintons elect to fill out a tax return for 1992. This is the first tax return as President of the United States for a year when he was not President of the United States. And a crucial decision there is they had decided to sell out of the Whitewater Development Company in December of 1992. Who was the person who did the paperwork on that? Vince Foster, right? The question, when you've got this troubled venture with bad corporate records, you had been the governor of Arkansas, there are state income taxes, there are forms that need to be filled out. None of those forms were properly filled out. Now you've decided you're exiting the investment. The question is, was it a loss or a gain? Or was it, you have to go into your records, you have to say, well, I put so much money in, and now I'm selling it. They elect to sell it for $1,000. And they say that the basis, that is to say the cost in this investment, was zero, when it wasn't zero. And there's a lot of, there are, in the various hearings that ensued after this, on Whitewater, on Madison, there are quite a few of them, thousands of pages. It shows clearly that both Clintons didn't care about Whitewater Development. They would write checks to other entities or personal checks or directly to a bank. When you run a corporation and you want to say, look, this is a real corporation, it's separate and apart from the shareholders, you have board minutes, you have
you're not mixing personal funds.
You take great pains to make sure that you don't do that, because you want to, if you want to avoid being sued, and it's what's called piercing the corporate veil.
Right.
If you want people to be able to protect you and say, look, whatever happened to Whitewater, it's just Whitewater. You can't sue me personally, because that was all done in a corporation. We did it properly. They didn't do it that way. Now, does this sound at all familiar to the to what you know about the Clinton Foundation? Here's a corporation that is a dodgy corporation being set up as a, in theory, can't miss proposition for the governor of the state. And it's dodgy as hell, multiple different names, multiple different banking names, no reporting, no accounting, no legal paperwork, nothing. This is how they roll, right? And so when the time, my assertion, I think, my working theory is that it's just how they do things.
Well, right. We're talking about putting up a red light camera, and they're like, what?
We don't do that. So anyway, the other interesting thing is they try to lay down a marker that they sold out, quote, the Whitewater development thing was a failure, they argue, because they sold out of all the lots by 1985 in a transaction where the real estate broker, who subsequently got in trouble for fraud, the real estate broker agreed to swap a used Piper aircraft and pay down some debt on the remaining property and release some portion of the liability in 1985, right? So
what did the aircraft have to do with it?
Chris Wade, the real estate broker, had this Piper aircraft. He didn't have cash for the lots. He swapped a crappy plane, which is probably saving him money.
Barry Seal had a Piper aircraft.
I wonder if it's the same type of aircraft.
I mean, that's what I'm like, that's weird. What's the plane have to do with it?
No, Wade was a broker. Wade in this proposition every time lots are flipped again and again, he takes a commission. He also was involved with a bank that would finance people who had credit. So he seizes on the fact that by 1985, Madison Guaranty, a supposed bank that Hillary was doing legal work for, was in desperate. It was on life support. And the Clintons desperately, I think, and the people around them wanted to say, our involvement with Whitewater ceased around 1985. This is old news. It was a failed venture. But then somebody like me would say, well, wait a minute. Why did you retain your interest in Whitewater and only sell it out in December of 1992 if it was a failed venture? If all the lots have been sold, what's the point of still keeping the corporate entity around, right? You've bought the land. You
developed
it, sold everything. Now you've got 6, 7, 8 years of corporate forms you got to file. You've got federal forms, you've got state forms, you've got expensive.
What do they normally do? Dissolve the corporation and have a management company or something?
There's no reason to have the corporation at that point unless what you're doing in that interim is participating in the continued flipping and reflipping of lots on the installment sale method and not recording any of that income on your personal or corporate income tax returns, and using that to finance the need to have a campaign, to win a campaign every 2 years as governor, or 4 years, whatever it was, in Arkansas. So it's far more likely to me that in that period, that of course we know with the Clinton Presidential Foundation, none of the legal work, none of the accounting work is done properly. That's how Bill and Hillary like to do business, monkey business. So. Yeah. And we know from multiple admissions, different people, McDougal's written a book, his wife has written a book, other people around us have written books, Hubble's written a book. We know, everyone says the records for Whitewater were a mess. Everybody.
How did they stop the investigation? They just said, that was a bad land deal and a right-wing conspiracy theory. Next question.
No, the way they did it, it was really interesting. They preyed on the experience of the Clintons, and people, Bernie Nussbaum, the White House counsel, I think, was against the idea of letting whatever they called it then, a special prosecutor, get hired. But Bill Clinton broke the tie and said, no, let's just I've got nothing to hide, let's do this. So they appointed a guy called Robert Fisk, who is with a good firm, Davis Polk. I've done a lot of work with him in the past, and it's a fine firm. And Fisk and his team make a mistake, and without getting into the details of it, they said stuff that was overheard that shouldn't have been said, that called into question the objectivity of their inquiry. And so Fisk gets out of the deal, and Ken Starr replaces Fisk.
Well, it's interesting that that's mentioned because this was the subject of the senatorial hearing this morning. He said something that revealed a bias in the investigation, so they kicked him out.
Right.
They were asking Rod Rosenstein. They got a lot of fancy lawyer language about how they were biased, but it didn't matter.
Right. Well, okay. So Fisk, Davis Polk is a large firm, has many clients, but one of its clients is International Paper. Arguably, in looking into this, what was going on in Whitewater, he had a conflict, I would argue, potentially, for reasons unrelated to his ultimate departure. So who replaces Fisk? Ken Starr. Ken Starr has a book called Contempt. And I happened to be reading it, and I was, I've never met Ken Starr, but I, not overly impressed, frankly. And
he's a damn good basketball coach.
Is he?
Well, I don't know. That's what he does now, doesn't he?
Ken Starr?
He was like a referee or something. I saw him wearing a basketball uniform.
Wow. In his book, it says, that he was honored to get contempt. He was honored to get a chance to, and I want to read this book, Monica's Story. I haven't done that yet. He was honored to get a chance to replace Fisk, but he says in his book that when he met with him and his team, the Fisk team, to try to transition, he was, as the English say and the Irish say, gobsmacked. It's like it's so complicated. And he writes in his book that he had no experience in real estate, commercial ventures, or finance.
You're hired.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I think, Bill and Hillary being very clever and saying, all right, yeah, we'll let you have a special prosecutor, but let us get control of, where we are here. Let us get reelected. We'll put this guy Starr in, and then we're going to, slow him down. We're going to make his life miserable. And we're also going to insert people onto Starr's team on the subject of coincidences. Do you think it's a coincidence that Rod Rosenstein was inserted into Starr's team to prosecute of all people, to prosecute Jim McDougal and Susan McDougal? I don't think that's a coincidence. Do you think it's a coincidence that Jim Comey was inserted into the Whitewater team? Do you think it's a coincidence that the person who ultimately interviewed Hillary Clinton and cleared her of the Travelgate scandal was none other than Rat Rosenstein? He was the last person to interview Hillary at the end of the inquiry and determined that she had no direct personal involvement, and still neglects on his resume to make that explicit in the timeline. He was out of one position, he says, until December 31st, 1997. In reality, he interviewed Hillary in 1998. So you look at all this and you start saying, now wait a minute. We've got a team here. We've got Mueller, we've got Rosenstein, and we've got Comey. All of these people missed the real fraud at the Clinton Foundation from 2001 to 2005, from positions of responsibility. Comey was leading the effort from 2001, directly from 2001 to sometime in 2002 or 3, and then indirectly as the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. He had purview over this. Mueller was head of the FBI from September 4th, 2001 till September 4th, 2013, and the Rat was in their Department of Justice deciding which tax fraud cases got prosecuted. And we know from the Hillary R. Clinton dump, we have a 40-part dump last time I checked.
Yeah.
And that's from a more recent set of investigations. Yet we only have a 3-part dump for the William J. Clinton Foundation investigation, which lasted for 4 years, much longer than the Hillary R. Clinton 1-year investigation over mishandling of classified information. How can you have 40 parts for Hillary and only 3 for this thing? And it's like other things I've looked into, when you get these letters that come to you saying, "Dear Charles, here is all of the information. It's this letter, that letter, and this memo, and that memo." And then you read the memo, or you read a letter, and this letter that you get says, "This is in response to a letter dated XYZ date," and you look back in the pile, and there's no such letter. You know? And so I am certain that the information that purports to be in the William J. Clinton Foundation investigation for 2001 to 2005 is incomplete. I am also certain that various and sundry people, I think Robin Gritz and others, talk about a sentinel system, a way of recording documents. And it's crucially important. You talk about the $20 bill a while back. It's crucially important to keep track of evidence and who had access to evidence and what is the evidence and where was it and who's. And so the evidence in the public domain, the negotiations back and forth with David Kendall, who was representing the Clintons and the Foundation in this inquiry, were intense. Where's all that paperwork back and forth about demanding the list of donors? Where's the donor list? How does that foot with the filings of the Clinton Foundation? How come nobody checked into any of that stuff? And so, and then in the Sentinel system, when did documents go in? Were all the documents put into the Sentinel system? Why was the original U.S. attorney replaced? Why did Comey go in there? Why was Mueller briefed? And in 2002, we know that happened. And why in 2002, when there had never been a legitimate audit of the Clinton Foundation, why did this big team, because we know at the end of the exercise it was a massive team of people, why did nobody say, you know what, this is kind of like an accounting project. Why don't we see if we can find an accountant to evaluate BKD's miserable work? And why don't we find maybe a lawyer, not from Arkansas, but familiar with Arkansas law, to see whether this thing actually ever existed? Instead of doing that, they went through the motions. They made sure that nothing damaging came out before for some reason, the 2004 election. And then they just cast it adrift and buried it in 2005. And Rosenstein went off to be the U.S. attorney in Maryland. So when you start looking at these, everything I'm talking about is factual. I'm weaving it together in a working theory. But when you're trying to understand the motivation for people to persecute Donald Trump, beginning latest in 2016, arguably before he went down the escalator at Trump Tower in June of 2015, when you're looking into the motivations of why somebody would do that, And in Barack Obama, you have a vindictive person, right? You know what he did to Flynn, the way he did it to Flynn. There are multiple episodes in his known life of the way he treats people he doesn't like. He humiliates them, he embarrasses them.
Kills them, I thought.
I'm talking about Barack Obama.
Yeah, so am I.
Oh, okay.
What happened to those guys who said that they were gay with him?
Oh, they didn't all die?
Not all.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
I think Larry Sinclair is still alive.
Yeah, but I think the other two are dead.
Is that right?
Yeah.
1 out of 3.
Right. Suddenly there's a lot less evidence.
1 out of 3 is actually 33%.
Right. That's a message to that guy.
33.333.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you look at all this, and then you have the further coincidence, or set of coincidences. The stuff comes up with, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee, July 6, 2015, says, you got to open an investigation into Hillary Clinton for mishandling. July 6, 2015. Okay. So the crack team...
Was it? Oh, 2015.
Right. The crack team that does this. Now, this is well before the primaries. It's well before Hillary. Hillary, actually, and Perkins Coie were in the process of rigging the primaries, or at least with the DNC, right around then. In August of, I think, 2015, they were doing that. Those negotiations came together. So what was the motivation of this Charles McCulloch, who was the Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee? Was he really trying to go after Hillary Clinton? Or instead, was this an operation designed to suck up all the incriminating information against her and give it to a team that was going to make sure that information was bleach bit out of existence, no ability for anybody ultimately to get to the truth? Was this McCulloch guy a good actor or a bad actor? Initially, I thought he was a good actor, but I'm convinced he is not a good actor. He is on the team representing. He left this position. He then subsequently was on the team at that small Compass Rose law firm representing the whistleblower whose name we can't use.
No,
the same guy.
Oh, right. So wait, I was about to bring up a picture of the crack team smoking crack, but wait a minute. So the guy, right, he was the Inspector General, then he went and became the head of that Compass Rose thing. And he's also, isn't he somehow involved in the Bar Association or something?
I don't know about that, but...
What's the guy's name?
Charles McCulloch, McCulloch.
No, I think it's the Inspector General. That's the part I was thinking about.
His successor was Michael Atkinson, who was the one who misread the law pertaining to whistleblowers, and it is alleged is complicit in the plot to shield somebody who certainly is not a whistleblower. He is a hyper-partisan punk who had been long involved in the corruption in Ukraine, but we're getting a little bit off kilter. So in 2015, this process begins. The team that is supposedly looking into this objectively includes Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. So then when a time comes, once they're clear they've stifled or they're about to stifle that investigation, they ignore in January of 2016 the State Department whistleblower who walks in, having sent a letter to Comey, walks into the Washington field office and says, hey, I'm a senior level State Department person with all these recommendations. Check me out. I'm here to tell you that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are violating their constitutional oaths. They're allowing corruption to be rife in the State Department and perhaps elsewhere. And I know enough about this that I want to go into a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized, what is it called, information facility or something like that?
Something like that.
I want to go into a SCIF with somebody who has the same or higher clearance as I do, and I will take you through chapter and verse in January of 2016. What does this crack team do? No, we're not going to meet with you. We don't want to do that.
Too busy smoking crack.
Yeah, there he is. That's him. Charles.
Well, this is an interesting document, isn't it? This is a pretty interesting document. This guy went from the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community to handling the...
What date, Jason?
This is September 22nd, 2011.
Right.
What?
He's put in place here right before Benghazi.
Oh.
There's a lot of problems.
Well, it's a year before Ben got it.
No, I know, but this is in the run-up to, the Libya stuff is, Congress is saying thou shalt not mess around in Libya, and Hillary's saying, I came, I killed, I conquered, whatever she said.
He came, you saw, he died. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, ha, 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 exactly.
And now everybody in Libya has been suffering since then.
Yeah.
And it's allowed Turkey to exert power in the region, gain influence.
Right. So,
but I mean, isn't it weird that this guy's overseeing the whole entire intelligence committee, and then the intelligence agent goes and gets representation from his law firm?
Right. Or it's weirder than that. I mean, he was.
Oh.
Yeah. So Feinstein, she's takes a break from interacting with her Chinese spy cadres, who are driving Miss Crazy around Washington D.C., San Francisco. And they insert this dude into be the inspector general of the intelligence community. It's classic Clinton-Obama approach. You have the appearance of there being an investigation, when in reality, the person who decides the basis upon which the matter will be pursued is an ally. And why I said it's worse is that McCulloch was the ICIG. He does know, and I assume if you put him in a place where he can't hide behind security clearance qualifications, you could get him to spill the beans about what really was going on. But of course, an inspector general only has the right to investigate current employees in the department,
right,
and the matter. So anybody who left, like Hillary Clinton, you can't necessarily, using the ICIG, get to the heart of what was going on. That guy leaves that position and then goes into this shitty little tiny firm, Compass Rose Law Firm, that has like 3 people in it. And by some amazing coincidence, this guy is defending the whistleblower who cannot be named and shamed.
Right.
Meanwhile, his successor is the person, I don't know, is his successor in the firm or not? Mark Zaid, I think, is in the firm.
Yeah, correct. But do you know what else is interesting about the Compass Rose, Charles?
It features, it's an old map. It's in many, many antique maps that I used to own.
Right. But it's also part of this logo. Boing. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
I mean, and also all these Rose references, they seem so, the Rose Law Firm, the Compass Rose Law Firm. The other place I saw a very interesting Compass Rose is Peter Nygaard's 727 has a stripper pole in it with a Compass Rose at the base. Did I show you this?
You may or may not have. I can tell you that is a
tacky interior for a jet. Not nearly as nice as yours.
Oh, I never had a jet. No, want a jet.
There, look at that.
Yeah.
Boom. So what's with all these Compass Roses, Nappy Rose Productions?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's more messaging.
Could be. But going back to this, stitching all this together.
Yeah.
What we've had here is a massive distraction, right? Before we get to the pandemic, March 16th forward, from really the date that Rosenstein showed up, we have been, instead of getting to the heart of what actually happened in the 2015-2016 election, who was meddling in it, what domestic people were meddling, what foreign people were meddling, and indeed, how much meddling has been going on in elections inside this country? Was the 2012 election straight up? Was the 2010 election, where the Tea Party rose to prominence, straight up? Was the Obama administration using illegal means to tamp down support for Tea Party conservatives and Republicans in that 2010 election? Did they ramp it up even further by 2012? And further in 2014, did they then graduate to a higher level or a lower level of criminality in 2016? And what about 2018? I mean, instead of asking those questions, Rod Rosenstein was content, to be driven to work or drive to work and chair these meetings and talk about processes and say everything's fine and I'm wonderful and and just completely miss what I believe is the largest set of unprosecuted corruption scandals ever attempted by any set of crime families anywhere. And so instead of banging him on the head, I wouldn't let him talk about him if I had been a senator. I'm not interested in what you did on August 2nd, 2017. I have no interest in that. Your first day on the job, what did you do about the Flynn prosecution and this crossfire razor exercise? When were you briefed on this? Did it come up, in your discussions before you took the post? What did you know about this? Okay? And the idea that this guy would let this prosecution get to a point where, Comey would have to be fired, where he was talking about maybe wearing a wire to implicate.
He totally denied that in the hearing.
I'm sure he's gonna do whatever he has to do to try to skate through it. His mission was to make it through that hearing. That was his.
Yeah.
He'll say anything.
Right. And I mean, there was something else that was quite interesting about the hearing, Charles, that you just reminded me of. They kept saying, because they just used it as basically like a sounding board for their favorite conspiracy theories. They went back to the Mueller investigation, and they said that the investigation concluded that Russia hacked the election. But
it didn't.
Well, of course. But even if it did, it's like, well, how did you conclude that if you never conducted a forensic examination of the thing that was supposedly hacked? And they're like, oh, don't ask that. We need to talk about George Floyd. It's like, wait a minute. What did he do with the FISA court? That they just took it so far away from the facts relevant to that hearing. It was absurd.
Right. And so the way they're playing, I think, unfortunately, I'm familiar with people who consider themselves to be Washington experts. They like to go down there. Some of the best ones insist on spending as little time as possible in Washington, D.C. But you always get lectures from supposed political experts about how the American public doesn't really care about these issues. At this moment in time, they care about racial justice, or they care about their jobs, or they care about both of it. They don't want to go back into history in 1992. Nobody's interested in the fact that politicians and their families unjustly enrich themselves. Everybody accepts that. Think of the years of public service and sacrifice. I mean, after all, you guys are making a lot of money. You shouldn't care about this stuff. And all of those experts are just dead fucking wrong. Yeah. I mean, there's on the streets, even of New York City, if I were to tell you prior to Plandemic and now this latest set of looting scandals, that people in New York City, and you know some of them, and I know some of them, are finally waking up to the fact that when the police are otherwise occupied,
chaos ensues.
Chaos ensues, and you can't just walk around like a martinet as Michael Bloomberg and say, well, I'll just have my security detail. Everybody doesn't have their personal security detail.
Or even if they did, he's secure, but every place else is destroyed.
Right. So the notion, people who live in cities, particularly this city, and because of Michael Bloomberg, are fond of saying that anybody who wants to own a gun is a moron. Because, of course, the police are there to protect you. Well, we see that that's not the case. We see that we have our mayor, DeCrazio. I mean, he is going through the motions of trying to tamp this down. The criminals all understand, the looters understand that if they get arrested, they don't even spend a night in jail. They're back on the street again. Right. They give fake addresses.
But do you know that that's what happened with those two lawyers? Oh, you've just reminded me, Charles. Actually, two things, and I don't mean to disrupt your flow, but there's another rose that I've been reminded of by our viewers, which is the Democratic Socialists of America utilize the rose. But those two lawyers who were arrested for throwing Molotov cocktails.
It didn't blow up, right?
That's how competent they are. But it's interesting because the firm that one of them works at is, what's the name of it? Something Pryor. And I was trying
Pryor Cashman.
Is that David Pryor?
Yeah.
Okay. I hope they fired these dopes.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
If they haven't already.
I mean, they could go work for, Bill Ayers and stuff like that, but it's...
They already are. Quite obviously.
So,
look at this.
Yeah.
That's a lawyer.
Yeah, I'm sure her parents are very proud of her.
Pakistani American.
As I said, I'm sure they're very proud of this. This is ridiculous.
That's terrorism.
I mean, she's probably, I doubt she's filthy rich. And
she's
so she's probably, maybe she got a full ride through college and law school, but she's probably sitting on student loans. unemployable, both of these people. And how many more people are out there like this? So if I had told you back in January that Manhattan residents who are, arch Democrats, who never Trumpers, diehard anti-Trump people, are actually admitting that they are trying to figure out how to get a gun to protect themselves. Those discussions are going on. It's not only that type of discussion. People are leaving this city in droves. They realize that DeCrazio is dedicated to the destruction of anybody but his closest supporters.
Communists.
And then on top of that, you have, I was talking about this, I was interviewed today for a Russian television program, and I was talking to them about that we have in this city, we have this moron as the mayor and the team around him, and many people way overpaid for doing crazy projects that are never accounted for. And then on top of that, we've got the state. And if that isn't run by Mario, Cuomo, who's, we're going to get into his sister's crooked charity, and that he was involved with as well. These are families that are dedicated to sponging off the public.
Yeah.
And, they're very reliable, both of them. They whatever they say to do, the exact opposite is the correct thing to do, because they're completely stupid, both these people.
I agree they're stupid, but I don't think that these mistakes are being made because they're trying to do things that are smart and they're incapable of that. I think they are deliberately trying to destroy the city and the country.
Yeah, they could be well doing a good job on that. So you have that. Then you have the issue of experts. I've talked about this in the past, that people who've been around tough decisions for decades use experts not to get the answer. You don't just take an expert's assessment and say, let's do it. Do whatever the expert said, that's what I'm going to do. Well, suddenly you don't need me if you're just going to hire an expert and have the expert do whatever the expert says is the correct thing to do.
I thought you were the expert.
Well, on certain things, maybe. but I'm not holding myself out as an expert, that I happen to know a lot now about charity law and a lot about fraud, but I'm not marketing my services. I'm not trying to, get paid for doing this. I'm just trying to expose what I consider to be as a massive, gripping set of frauds that makes for interesting stories and maybe videos. So we relied on Birx, we relied on Fauci for the pandemic, and the original concerns you had and the concerns I had about the model being all wrong and unreliable and not something.
No, they still say this is all going well because we forced everybody to stay home.
Right, exactly.
We did it. Yay.
Yeah, exactly. Yay! But actually, they're now, Birx and Fauci are both apparently reports coming out that they're mad at China because China lied to them. That's their defense.
Yeah.
So here we are. It's June, what is today, the 3rd, 4th?
Yeah,
3rd. And we are now scant months away from the 60-day cooling off period in September before the November election. If we don't have indictments public by then and plea agreements public by then, we won't see them before the election. And then the game will really be on.
By when? When's the day?
60 days before the election.
But so that's
September, I forget the exact date, 3rd or 4th, something like that. And so what I think is going on, based on my experience in high-profile corporate legal matters and business matters, I believe that the Clintons, the Obamas, and other targets of the Durham investigation, potential targets of the Durham investigation, are shit scared. I believe that they know that the case that could be made against them is massive and will prove effective. And they cannot count on everybody who's been involved in the conspiracy to both carry out the crimes and obstruct the inquiries of these crimes. They can't count on the loyalty of everybody. They have to wonder, is somebody going to crack? And I think this looting exercise, and as much as I think that what we know so far, just the video is extremely disturbing of the what was his name again?
George
Floyd. I mean, it's and I've seen other examples of police brutality myself. I haven't seen the many kindnesses that policemen and women render all the time as well. So, let's be really careful when we look at one incident and say every police person is like that, because that certainly isn't the case. But,
right.
I think this is a message. And Obama, made the mistake. He should not have himself done this Medium post that he did a few days ago, talking about now is the time. We're never going to go back to normal. Now is the time to achieve constructive change. I think he and his team are sending a message to the Trump team that if you want to go and fully prosecute us, you better get ready for a race war. That's what's coming.
Well, it's here.
Well, I mean, worse than this. You know, because we know there's so many. We have 335 million people in this country. We have been, knocked to our knees by the pandemic, and we have now in New York City, a once vibrant city. You can forget tourism. You can forget about much.
Who would want to run a business here now?
Right. You could forget about gigantic condo development plans at $1,000 a square foot and up.
Oh, there's already people going to be selling places, right. And there's tons of places that are in the middle of being built that they probably won't be able to.
Or just give them to the Clinton Foundation, get a fancy valuation, write it off in your tax. I'm just teasing. But anyway, so we're now in this moment. It's June 3rd, and practically speaking, if you've got kids in high school or college or trying to go to college, and you're thinking about how the year sets up, you've got some big decisions to make. And they're trying to, as they always do, this is David Kendall of Williams and Connolly's strategy, run the clock out, stall, delay, obfuscate, point in the other direction. Offsetting, the gloom and doom that might come from thinking about what I've just been saying was the tweet this morning from Donald Trump, focusing attention on Undercover Huber, which is a fake Twitter account. And if you can find it, Jason, it came out this morning at roughly 6:43 or thereabouts. On Twitter, and it basically Trump calls Huber out. If you just go down his feed,
the fake Huber or the
just go to Trump's, because Trump tweets out about.
But you're saying Trump is calling out the fake. Who's Trump calling out?
Undercover Huber. So we just need to go back to the around the time, and you'll see it. You're much faster than I am.
10 hours.
Is this June 2nd? No, it's this morning at 6. Today's the 3rd, right? Why?
Well, he's retweeting stuff from June 2nd.
Well, if you just go into Google and do Undercover Huber and Trump, and you should get it pretty fast that way.
Yeah, there's actually an advanced. Twitter search here.
Yeah,
President Trump. Is this it?
That's it. Yeah, President Trump calls Huber a garbage disposal unit for closing the Hillary Clinton probe. And I had the pleasure of meeting Joe DeGenova many months back when Huber was initially getting involved, and I asked him as a friend of mine from the South used to say, what in the fuck is Huber doing? And DeGenova told me point blank. He said, as far as he could tell, nothing. Remember, DeGenova represents William Campbell, who is somebody that Huber should be talking to. We know that Larry Doyle and John Moynihan, they testified to Meadows, to Congress, that they sent gigantic files to Huber's office 3 separate times. They would send it, and nothing would happen, and they'd call him up, and the guy would say, well, we don't have it. Could you send it again? They send it again. Call to follow up. We don't know what you're talking about. Could you send it again? They send it again. I mean, contrast that treatment with the treatment of Roger Stone or the treatment of Paul Manafort. And then also ask yourself, mainstream press, tremendous interest in the Russian hoax, fascinated in the Russian hoax. No interest whatsoever in Rudy Giuliani and the Ukraine, nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas no interest in why this unnamed whistleblower, who this unnamed whistleblower is, whether the unnamed whistleblower had anything to do with operating in the Ukraine. Answer, yes, he did, according to reporting. And, the bias here in the press, the willingness of the press to say, well, there's nothing unusual about this Huber guy being served on a silver platter, evidence that could be used to round up the Clinton Foundation frauds from the inside, using real forensic accountants. You could easily have gotten this done well before the November 2018 midterm elections. Instead of doing that, spin wheels, vacuum up documents, and hope that nobody puts all this together. But I interpret Trump's tweet as a sign that he has gotten, or people have gotten, a briefing going back over the trail of why didn't Huber see the obvious? Why didn't Rosenstein see the obvious? Why didn't Comey see the obvious? And why didn't Mueller see the obvious, going way, way back? Yeah. And who are they protecting and why? And why would so many people go out of their way to protect the Clintons? If they're protecting the Clintons, is it possible that the first crime family of politics would have, while Bill was president of the United States and afterwards, vacuumed up as much information as possible on anybody who could challenge Hillary Clinton at a future date? And might that person, one person of focus, have been Barack Obama? And it's not the time now to go through the many skeletons and perceived skeletons of Barack Obama's closets, I should say. But it is not, it's an excellent, in my view, working theory to assume that the Clintons, while they held the keys to the car, they went back over anybody who could be a rival or a future opponent to make sure they had dirt ready to go, and the off chance that they would face a person like Barack Obama. Now, back in 2000, early 2001, Barack Obama was a cipher. He was not a major national figure yet. But people knew about him. Certainly heirs knew about him.
Yeah.
And he had attracted a certain amount of attention for the book that he did, or somebody did, Really Not Dreams of My Father. So anyway, I think where we are is we have the reality play that the mainstream press is going to try to spin for us. But beneath the surface, I think Durham is finally way over the targets. And my suspicion is, others are reporting, John Solomon and others are reporting, that plea agreements and indictments finally are near. I would suspect that is the case. I think that the press is talking about when's the Durham report going to come. I don't think the Durham report is going to come first. I think it's going to be indictments,
indict people,
and plea agreements, and squeezing people, and people are going to get squeezed very, very hard.
I hope you're right, Charles. It's been just so long that nothing has happened. They're going to really have to change things up. Someone in our comments sent me this from Robert Kennedy Jr.'s Children's Health Defense. Just out yesterday, Moderna's guinea pig, sickest in his life after being injected with experimental vaccine. So this is quite different than the news being reported in the New York Times, which says that out of the 8 people they tested it on, they were quite healthy. I mean, you could probably inject 8 people with heroin and they might be okay the next day.
No, this is just throwing. Everyone says, the climate deniers and any conservative is anti-science, right? I am the son of a PhD in nuclear physics who is very precise to this day in how he thinks about things, and that's not medical science. That's nuclear physics. People you know better than I do in the medical field, are pretty cautious because there's substantial liability as a practicing doctor for, being reckless or harming people. And the idea that a virus that came out of the blue, let's say charitably, in March in this country, arrived in this country, let's say by February, March, or maybe earlier, one of the many viruses that are out there, that the correct decision, because we got everything wrong in treating it so far, is we're now going to instill the fear of God in every American and say, you know what's coming for you? This aging population, you're going to be forced to take this vaccine, whether or not it's proven. Yeah. And the population is aging, and so therefore it will have comorbidity issues. And you're just going to have to do this because we're control freaks. We say you're going to have to do it. Tony Fauci, Bill Gates, Deborah Birx, this is what you work for them. And while you're at it, why don't you just turn over all of your assets and just give it to them? Because, you're essentially going to be a slave to them. I mean, that's so far away from being the responsible approach here. Yeah. How many people actually died of COVID-19 alone? By what age category? And, do we see any patterns in all this?
I think it was like 5.
It's a very
Maybe
low
6.
number. Yeah, very low number. And
by the way, here's our friend Alan Dershowitz to tell you how we're going to legally force you to do this.
Right. I mean,
he never lies.
No, never. No conflicts of interest either. None.
So, Charles, there's an interesting thing here because at first, I was like, well, maybe this is biased or whatever, but this is, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is referring to the actual press release from Moderna Pharmaceuticals. They're saying 20% of the test subjects experienced serious adverse events. And that means they're required hospitalization and medical intervention. Yeah. Vomiting, 103-degree temperature. His girlfriend caught him as he fell. So, I mean, if you're old and you get 103-degree temperature and fall, that sounds like you could die.
Well, and this is, again, to put it in the polarizing extremes. I mean, on the one hand, you have people who are just loners, lone wolves, and they want to make a decision. That's more like me. You want to make a decision with experts, qualified practitioners. You want to seek out multiple points of view and make a considered decision if you have that luxury of time.
You don't think Dershowitz's medical opinion on something that hasn't been invented yet is adequate?
I'd take the diarrhea expert's opinion ahead of Dershowitz. So we've gone from a system. I remember I was quite sick as a child, many different ways, and going as a little kid, not really knowing what was going on, and you go and I'd meet with a doctor, like a top doctor, and my father or mother both would be there, and they wouldn't necessarily, when I was very young, explain what was going on, but over time they'd explain these different issues. And, we didn't have a PhD in diarrhea writing, a million pages of bullshit regulations to figure out how to treat every little Charles Ortel in the world because this person is such an expert on nothing. And we've evolved from having not enough frontline experienced nurses and experienced doctors dealing with the sick to creating these gigantic healthcare bureaucracies. So fancy pants Hillary Clinton, Chelsea Clinton and Hillary Clinton could dictate, the final years of your life, which should be the senior years where you enjoy life the most. It's just a parasitical system. We should be churning out far fewer MPHs and whatever the doctorate is of health, and far more medical doctors. We should change the liability system. People, you cannot take risk out of a system. Right?
That's what Bill Gates wants to do with the vaccine.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that'll work.
And that's what they already did with the 1986 Child Vaccine Injury Act. The other thing that occurs to me, Charles, if 20% of the people taking this vaccine need to go to the hospital and have medical intervention,
it's a lot of people.
Yeah, do we have even remotely close to 20% of the people getting coronavirus having to go to the hospital? Maybe not.
No. Nobody knows, of course, because we.
Well, what if the vaccine overwhelms the medical system?
Right. Yeah, it's just, again, you go from thinking for yourself, taking risks. You don't jump off a skyscraper to see whether somebody will catch you before you hit the ground. You think about the risks that you might want to take and understand you cannot completely eliminate. We're all going to die eventually. You can't eliminate that risk, for example. And so you have to think about what you're doing in relation to other things that you might want to do, and you shouldn't be delegating unless you're mentally incompetent or whatever. You shouldn't be delegating crucial decisions to supposed experts. You need to. That's why we try to structure these shows so that you become engaged, thinking through. Check what I'm saying. Right. Maybe I'm wrong. Occasionally I'm wrong.
It's rare. The funny thing is, when I gave an example to Dershowitz. In that interview, he contradicts himself because I said, it's like, Dersh, your legal argument is based on, okay, these medical experts have formed an opinion, so now we have the legal authority to enforce it. But then when I said to him, look, there's been so much equivocation since this started that it doesn't seem like they know anything about the virus. And he's like, well, I agree with you about that. So it's like, wait, stop right there. What the hell are you talking about? If you agree with me about that, wait, it made no sense.
Exactly.
Then he said that I gave him the example of if you went to the doctor and they said you need to chop off your leg, would you go do that? Or would you get a second opinion? He said, I just wouldn't listen to that doctor at all. I was like, no, that's even more sensible. What are you talking about, Dersh? He makes no sense, Charles. But all right, so we've lived another day. That's good. Hopefully the building doesn't burn down and the city doesn't get rioted and overthrown. I got to tell you, this has been such a polarizing event. I would be hopeful. I think if Martin Luther King were alive, he would be giving speeches like, obviously it's a tragedy that George Floyd was killed, and anytime there's police brutality, it needs to be dealt with swiftly and with justice. But this can't be a moment to divide. And in fact, the Black Lives Matter movement, I've seen protests now with signs where somebody had a sign that said, white lives matter too much. And it's like, if you even say all lives matter, that's racist.
No, I don't.
So this is such a polarizing thing. It's serving only to drive people further apart. I really think that Martin Luther King and peace-minded leaders of movements would say, look, this is the moment that we need to come together.
Right.
And they wouldn't name something Black Lives Matter. They would name it like Justice Matters or All Lives Matter. What about the white guy who got his head smashed into the sidewalk? What about the black guy who got a knee on his neck from Francisco Garcia? Why has nobody been asking the commissioner of the NYPD, why don't they do something about Francisco Garcia? That would impress me much more than taking a knee.
Well, as I say to people, what about, there's a lot of injustice. First of all, just like you can't take risk out of the system, there's a lot of injustice around the world, even in supposedly advanced societies. So if you want to start talking about an area of injustice, where is the outrage that should be there for the ways in which the original residents of this great country are treated today? You don't see, I hesitate to call them Indians because they're technically not
Native Americans.
Well, they may not even have been Native Americans. So that's why I refer to them as residents.
Indigenous people.
Well, residents.
Okay.
They were here before the settlers came. They're residents. The way we treated those residents. You don't see, there was a time, the Wounded Knee and commercial stuff like that, but you don't see this, first of all, you don't see the descendants of the residents constantly yelling and screaming about injustice. And there are injustices, don't get me wrong. But I think we need to revisit that. And this whole place that we find ourselves in now, I would have a lot more sympathy if the business model was not led by people like, I don't pay my taxes, Al Sharpton, and I'm going to destroy Tawana Brawley's life and Stephen Pagone's life, and now swan around having lost a bunch of weight and expensive
lap band surgery.
Yeah, and expensive Italian suits or whatever he's wearing, and not filling out his paperwork properly, not accounting for anything, and getting a job for MSNBC, doing a show that nobody watches with any common sense. That business model is not the business model that accomplished people want of any race. They want to just be judged on their accomplishment. They want a realistic chance to flourish, to seize opportunity respectfully and make the most of their lives. And so, if Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and others, wanted a project to try to gain credibility, they would stop the violence in Chicago. Chicago has among the strictest gun laws in this country. Chicago, every day.
But yet everybody's getting shot.
And the people who are being shot are black people.
Unlicensed guns.
With black people shooting other black people with unlicensed guns. If you truly believe that Black Lives Matter, and you truly felt that you had this great ability to connect with people and lead people, you would reach across the aisle as Sharpton and Jackson and these other people and say, look, Trump has done enormous things, and the facts before pandemic hit us, the economy is really on fire, particularly for minority people. You would reach across the aisle and say, you know what, let's pick the cities where gun violence is the highest, and let's pick one where we can win quickly. And let's make it work in Chicago, or let's make it work, you name the city. Do you see any of that? No, it's all these, teary-eyed lectures, and now we need $14 trillion in reparation. This is just...
that's a whole other thing. But what I'm seeing a lot of is these social justice warriors and their parents, Mercedes, driving around handing out bricks. There are some really interesting videos of people who are, legitimate justice-minded people who are in the Black Lives Matter movement who probably don't realize what it actually is. They're in it for what they want it to be, to have justice and equality, and for black people's, in many cases, legitimate grievances to be heard and addressed. But all these people that are walking around, I saw a guy buying a power drill. What's he going to do with that? I think he was going to unscrew wood and loot. I walked by two black guys who were obviously homeless in a bus shelter, and there was a lot of activity going on around there, nobody helping them. What about all the black lives on the subway? It didn't seem to matter to any of these people when you and I were riding on there. Clearly they're in danger. Everybody down there in Penn Station, A lot of black people I saw there defecating on the floor. Why didn't all these people take some of the money they're spending buying Molotov cocktails and buy some lunch for these guys?
Because it's about crashing the system. I mean, this is when you get into the history of Antifa, they call it Antifa, but it's really Antifa, and other organizations like it. The people who are starry-eyed supporters of that movement have not done their homework.
Right.
And or believe they're going to get away with yet another criminal conspiracy to tank the American and global economy and replace it with a system where they believe they're going to be running things. And, I believe that here in New York City, people are properly concerned. You and I are both concerned about, and our friends here, about what's going on. You now get calls from people all over the place. Are you okay? What's going on?
We've invested our whole life in being here, the neighborhood, the businesses, everything, and you're just going to now destroy the city, and then what?
Yeah, because DeCrazio and Cuomo don't know, they can barely tie their shoes, let alone think through how to run.
They did this. They did certain important things that made sure that this happened. They absolutely could have kept the economy open and kept people going to work. They could have, they want to reopen in careful waves, but they had to shut everything off right away. Why didn't they say, look, here's what we're going to do. If you're the first week, we're going to close down in waves. If you're over this age, stay home. And they say, oh, it's not controlling the sickness. Now we need to close down even more. They didn't do that. They just shut it down and decided that everything that they did is right. And the reason why the numbers are going down is because everybody stayed home. But we still need, everybody now needs to wear masks. And now that the riots are happening, we're ready to open next week. What?
Yeah, and now in addition to that, I tweeted out, is it at all suspicious to you that, many weeks ago, Cuomo and de Blasio and other mayors and governors decided, we don't want these hardened criminals in prison getting sick of COVID.
That's ridiculous.
We would hate to see that happen. Let's just release them into society.
And then lock up regular civilians who are at risk of spreading coronavirus. It makes no sense.
And so you have a lot of thinking to do about this history and going back through it. We will be doing some of that. I'm mindful of your time, Jason. And
well, one last thing I wanted to discuss before we close today, Charles. So the president, he announced that he wants to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. And I feel like he wouldn't do that just to create Twitter fodder. That seems like the chess move that you make before you close down the Open Societies Foundation for funding terrorism. Do you see any indications that that's about to happen?
Yeah, one of our great friends sent us something about an organization called Indivisible, which is a 501c3. There are a large number of these amorphous 501c3s. Now, bear in mind, a 501c3 is not supposed to engage in partisan political activity. It certainly is not supposed to be a vehicle by which rich billionaires can make contributions, take tax deductions, to destroy the United States of America, to replace it with something that the same rich billionaires believe they can then control. So you have the 501c4 and you have a 501c3. And the issue with this, David Brock does this, is to do this correctly, if we had an IRS that cared about it, you check and see, are the people in the 501c4, are the people doing this work also doing this work? Are they sharing expenses? Are these really separate or not? And chances are they're not separate at all. This is, the PAC gets checks in Washington, D.C. The charity also gets checks at a different post office box in Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. is notorious for having a charity oversight operation that is impenetrable, right? You cannot, we've tried in certain cases to get files. It's in backup storage, you'll have to wait months to get that, or they're just not interested in letting you see what's really going on here. So yeah, I would be attacking, I would actually frame it differently. I'd say the last time the charity world has been brought into attempted modernity was 1969. That's 51 years ago. Okay, chances are after 51 years, there could be a few tweaks that we might want to consider pursuing.
Well, I don't know. Dershowitz like Supreme Court decisions from 115 years ago, so maybe they want to leave it as it is.
Exactly. So I think there has been a lot of progress around the world. I would look for things to happen here as June gets closed out. Trump certainly is taking a lot of incoming at the moment. New York City is taking a lot of incoming, as is Washington, D.C. and other cities.
We should let people know that it seems that last night was less violent than the previous night, maybe in part because some people were adhering to the 8 p.m. Curfew.
We'll see. One worry I have is that there's a lot now of plywood at street level, all over the city. You burn that stuff up. There seems to be, when you review the videos that are on there, rantingly.com, by the way, has a pretty good daily summary, rantingly.com. You see that there are quite a few vignettes of what the bad apples were doing. And to me, it comes across as a bunch of kids, out of control kids, and mixed in some professional criminals have come here and said, New York's a rich place, we're going to steal as much as we can. And you and I noticed that on one of our walk-arounds. I think we talked about it. I saw two tough-looking guys in a big SUV driving around, one talking on a cell phone from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
In the middle of our walk-around. What were you doing coming in here? What did you think you were going to accomplish coming in from Pennsylvania, other than setting yourself up to maybe rape, pillage, and steal once it got dark? So I would hope that there's good electronics surveillance information and cell phone data, and that people actually, unlike the Obama era FBI, that we have real investigators who've been on this for a while. Because it sure seems to me like before the time Hillary lost, people were setting up for the contingency plan, the insurance policy, to torture Trump. And that I would suspect a fair amount of that work was done in the guise of charity. Clandestine, donations to charities where we didn't really care what you did with the money, and then that money leaked out to pay for all these operatives and these looters and other people who've been fighting Trump since really June of 2015. So let's hope that we actually make some progress. I don't want a report. I want indictments. I want fair trials. You are presumed innocent until proven guilty, so let's let real prosecutors do that. But enough is enough. We really wasted, in summary, we learned today conclusively that much of what happened involving Mueller, involving the election of 2018, all of it was, false information, a false narrative. We've lost this year, since March 16th, all the economic spills and damages that we've suffered. But politically, and for people as you age, each year, a year is a long time if you're 85 years old. And do we really want to torture the American?
Or if you're one.
Or if you're one, exactly. It's wrong of these people to do what they did, and examples need to be made of them. Because if we don't do that, there are going to be worse versions of Rod Rosenstein and Mueller and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, who look at these precedents and say, literally, we can get away with murder.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that won't be happening for very much longer, Charles. And, we made the decision to move the format inside. It's been getting sort of alternatively darker and lighter outside. It looks like it's going to pour at any moment. So that could help suppress violence tonight. I think rioters like convenience, and they don't want to get wet.
That's right. They don't want to be deluged.
The other thing I'm a bit concerned about is that it might have been a deliberate kind of stand down on the first day of the new curfew to sort of get the cops' defenses down and then come out strong in a day or two.
I think the real issue is going to be once temperatures rise. Once we get it, New York City can have long periods of time with 90 plus degrees Fahrenheit temperatures and 90% humidity, and asphalt starts melting, tempers start.
I got to get the air conditioner fixed.
You might want to do that. Yeah.
I mean, I can't even get anybody in here, I don't think, because of the fake coronavirus.
That's probably true.
But it's also interesting, they're getting ready to tell us that all this rioting is going to spread coronavirus. The other thing that's so weird, all these stupid Antifa people, they're riding their bikes up to me and saying they're going to kill me and they're going to fight, and they're throwing Molotov cocktails and burning down buildings and breaking windows. But wear a mask. You don't want to get sick.
That's right. While they're smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, you got to be careful, Charles. All that rioting, you don't want to get sick. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. And please, if you've been watching Crowdsource the Truth, if you're new, become a sponsor. Go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's really important that the viewers sponsor the show. I can't bring you these shows each day without your support and sponsorship. So thanks to everybody that's been making the show possible. See everybody tomorrow.